We'll call this special meeting of the Itasca County Board of Commissioners to order. It is Thursday, January 16th, 2020, 7 p.m. We are in the Itasca County Boardroom. And before we get started with the regular agenda, if it pleases the board, I would like to add Section 3, citizen input to the agenda.
Section 3?
Yes, after
Okay.
Section 2, regular agenda, Section 3, citizen input, adjournment will be Section 4.
That's
Support.
usually not numbered on the agendas, and my apologies, I did forget that.
That's okay.
Support. And do you need a motion to make that happen?
Just by consensus.
Okay.
All right. With that, we will proceed to the regular agenda. Item 1 is ICTV coverage and costs. Brett Skiles, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At your first meeting, you had quite a bit of discussion about how we wanted to get this out to the public. We were very interested in getting this out in all ways that we can. ICTV is who we normally use for our regular board meetings, so I did meet with them to look at what it would cost for these additional meetings. That is in the packet, which you can look at. But again, it's not so much a per meeting charge as if it's an hourly charge and what it would cost. So again, they have ICTV, they do stream this, they put it on YouTube, they have it on demand at watchictv.org. So lots of avenues, and then of course it gets to the 2 television stations as well. And if you guys are amenable to that, we can just make that happen, and when she sends a bill, I'll approve it.
Mr. Ives.
Mr. Chair, I guess in the beginning of this all, we said how important it was to have, the public being informed at all given times. And I think with this kind of a cost, I guess I personally would like to see ICTV try to broadcast anything and everything, open house wise, you name it. If Beth George, January 28th, just to let you know, Harris Township, 7 p.m. How's that? But I personally would like us to cover this kind of an extra expense. Anybody else?
I guess, for what I have envisioned for the town hall style meetings, it's just very informal, no real presentation, but more of interpersonal discussion and people coming in and coming out. So I don't know how that would work with filming in the sense that we do, here, where there's structured agenda and presentations. So it's not that I'm against it. It's just, I don't know if it's the best use or if it would make sense to do in how I'm planning on proceeding. Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of leaned down the same lines. At the beginning, I, along with the rest of the commissioners, said, do everything and anything we can to create the transparency and get the public informed. But again, after we'd set these up, our Tuesday or first and third Tuesday meetings, like tonight, they're pretty formal. We hear our presentations. They're covered by ICTV. I envision these meetings with our townships and other small cities kind of the same way. They're more informal. We're going to show whatever we have, at least at that time, as a presentation, give information on it, and more of a come and go. You don't stay through the full 2 hours. If you've got 15 minutes to come in, share your comments, and then leave. And I just think that would be really difficult for Beth's staff to try to capture that.
I agree.
But again, I'm open to anything. I still am firm, committed to our transparency and whatever we can do, but I just don't know that that's even going to make it possible.
Mr. Chair. Commissioner Tinquist.
One of mine is going to be blended into a city council meeting It's kind of expected to be a lower turnout and not a very long presentation, is what they're saying. I was just wondering if it would make sense if the individual commissioners kind of used their judgment, kind of gauged what, working with the township or the city that you were gonna hold the event at, and just if you had a feel for what kind of turnout you're gonna be, and if it would be worth it at that point, or if that's gonna get it too messed up where some are having all the coverage and some aren't using any. I don't know. Thinking out loud here.
Mr.
So, Mr. Chair, so I guess I'm kind of getting this flavor from the other board members is you kind of see this as a walk-in, you got a bunch of boards alongside the wall, communicate with your people and answer any kind of questions one-on-one, not something like we've done before when it comes to like coffee with the commissioners where we're basically sitting up in front of a crowd and they can ask questions. We answer best we can. We show, pictures or something like that. You're seeing more of a walk around style deal. Is that how you guys kind of see it?
Mr. Trump.
I would envision it where we would go to our hearings, whether it be before a council meeting or a separate, and just kind of like an open house like we're going to be doing here at the courthouse, and having the information, given a brief description of where we came from and how we got to where we're at, and then question and answer. That's how I would see it.
I see these morphing real quick too. After we do a couple, they pick up on some ideas from each other, and they might change again depending on the crowd, who you have there, questions that are coming at you. So I think we're gonna have to keep them pretty much unstructured and just go with the flow.
I agree with you, and I think situations will be different, and the first one will probably or could potentially look different than the last one.
Absolutely.
Terry, go ahead.
So I just think, and maybe just off subject slightly, not talking about ICTV, but as we start to structure these, now we've scheduled them, but I think it's important that we kind of structure them so that we can bring back whatever results might be there. And I'm thinking a sign in for sure, so that we know and we can document historically how many people were at each one, and then have some uniformed sheet that if an individual wants to make a comment either for or against a particular option, that we have that for them. And then we can bring those back as well, and that can be included in the more formal discussions on our first and third Thursdays.
That's a good idea. Mr. Anderson.
You don't mind, I'm gonna play it a little off his. So, like the idea of, sign-in sheet and some props that we could have with maps and that type of thing. What about, the survey we talked about? That's coming up. We're gonna talk about that next. Okay. Can we have that available for people to hand out so they can go online, do that, or do a hard copy while they're there? They can fill it out. That type of a situation. It kind of encumbers our open house concept where, you have people there, you can hand this out here, please fill it. They can go home and do it. They can do it right then and there, whatever it might be. So.
When you decide on a survey, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we can certainly have a paper version copy. However you want to get that information back, we'll have it online if that's what you decide. So that all the options will be available when it comes to that survey.
Well, Mr. Chair, I still think, if it's capable of having something like this, even if it's not so much of a meeting and it's just, showing an open house style, I still think there's merit to it. I know there's a cash dollar to it, but I still think there is some merit to it, so.
Yeah, I would say I would be agreeable to approving this, and if individual commissioners want to televise and it feels like that fits the structure of what they're going to be doing, then having that approved and take advantage as you will. Would be my
Or
thought.
don't want, maybe we should set it up that way. Just assume that they're all gonna be covered, and then if you know that you're just gonna have a small turnout or it's gonna be a quick meeting or something, then you cancel that one.
Sure.
I guess, Mr. Chair, I I think for ICTV's sake, we gotta have a little bit more of a 2-day notice. That doesn't work. I mean, I wouldn't want that in the catering business. I know I wouldn't do that. So
Would you
I,
like to come on?
I appreciate your idea, Mr. Tinquist. If we go forward and need to cover all of these meetings, which we will do whatever the commissioners want, but if we go forward and have to do all of these, I'm actually probably going to have to hire a part-time person. So, putting them all out there and then canceling, which would have an impact on a part-time person. So, if we had knowledge ahead of time, of, we're going to cover one in each area or two in each area or whatever. We'll do whatever, but if it's going to be big, then I'm going to have to hire. If it's not going to be so big, I'm not going to have to hire.
okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, with the population in Harris Township, I would presume that would be probably a good one to at least have ICTV cover. We have 3,400 people in that township, so that's just me. You guys can speak for your guys' areas on what you guys feel. I guess I'd like to have it January 28th, 7 p.m. Okay.
Terry.
Maybe, Mr. Chair, maybe what we could do, just like scheduling our meetings, whether they be with townships or the other cities, is that set a deadline and we can get to our administrator with what meetings we positively want to have covered, so Beth knows, and she can plan that at that point. And, do it in a week or,
I think that's a great idea. So do we want to make a motion tonight to approve ICT coverage on an individual basis?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, keep it clean.
I'd make the motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. That motion carries. We move on to item 2, media costs for public notice. Brett.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. At your last meeting, you wanted to have staff look at what it would cost to put what you said was the media platforms for getting public notice out for these town hall meetings, but other things as well. Basically, all the publications came back and said they would guarantee it at the same rate that they bid on for being the official paper or not the official paper. So I don't have all those rates in here, but you can see the emails that they all guaranteed those same prices. So it's nothing exorbitant. If we want to get those out, we can. And then I'll have a couple more things after that discussion.
Commissioner Snyder.
And maybe this will roll into what Brett has, but I would make it an ASAP deal. Commissioner Ives, I think your first one's the 28th, so we don't have a lot of time. And again, I think it's really important that we not just hold these meetings, but the public is adequately informed, so they know the date. So I think it's important that we work time we have yet this week maybe, and come up with whatever that ad or article is going to look like with at least to that current date, what we have for meetings out there.
Mr. Ives.
So, Scenic Range News, Herald Review, / Manny Shopper, Watts News. Watts News is what?
That's the Big Fork Electric Co-op.
Okay, Big Fork Electric
And
Co-op.
they're
Okay.
already notified, they have it,
All
and
right.
actually Marcel is going to pay for it, Marcel Township.
Perfect.
Yep.
So,
So Marcel, Big Fork, and Effie, those that are scheduled, they're already in the Watts News.
okay.
Yep.
Now, the sheriff, the last time we had a meeting, said that he could use KMFY, KOZY, and their public broadcasting deal. I would like to see radio used a little bit too. I'm, radio guy. People do listen to the radio. So ICTV, I think, would be an easy one to use too. And
Community calendar.
yeah, community calendar and roll it. And one of my real big concerns here is if you're going to do a survey, to have that broadcasted on everything, so somebody living in Squaw Lake can fill out a survey as easy as somebody, living in Blackberry. So, I guess that's one of my, even if they don't come to a meeting, they can download it off the internet or whatever it might be and submit it.
Agreed.
Mr. Chair, to that point, yeah, absolutely, that our notice would go out to the radios and other publications as well.
Can someone talk about where it says page 10 of 11, the news release distribution?
Yeah, I
Amanda?
can. So the news release distribution list is the list that we use when we send out things such as public notice or what they refer to as a news release. Then we send that out, and it's up to them if they want to publish it or include it, but more often than not, they have. And that's where you would hear it on the radio or get it on, as you can see on the list, ICTV is included, as well as the radios. And then some outlying, Duluth News or I can't remember the name, the Brown,
Aaron Brown's.
yeah, I can't remember the name of that, but
Minnesota Brown.
Hibbing, Daily Tribune, other entities are included on that besides those that we actually got prices from.
Mr. Harris.
Thank you. How about our public radio station, 2KEXE?
Yep,
Hit
they're on
that
there.
audience too?
Mhm.
Okay.
Terry.
So just a point to that, I understand, and I understand the concept here. It's up to them whether they want to print it, but it's usually a news release. It's an article. Don't you think it's best served if we, just make an agreement that we're going to pay for the ads, that we were guaranteed they're going to be there? We know what's going to be placed in the ad and how often it'll be run.
Yeah,
I would
I agree. We want to. The point is to get it into the
capture our audience.
on all the platforms and in the media, and to assure that happens. So what? What is the pleasure of the board?
So, Mr. Chair, are we going to, in the printed media, Scenic Range, Herald Review, are we also going to include Hibbing to reach the east side?
Commissioner, yeah, that was my request. I mean,
Okay.
people where I live read and receive the Hibbing Daily Tribune.
Is there anything that we are missing on the west side now that Western Itasca is no longer in business? Not much we can do there. Okay. So I would make a motion, and probably going to have to structure this, but Scenic Range, Herald Review / Manny's, and the Hibbing Daily Tribune. Is it the Daily?
Yeah.
No, okay, still is, okay. We'd have to consider maybe Hibbing a little different, but Scenic Range and Herald Review and Manny's, that we would have an ad in every issue for what's left of this month, as quickly as we could get it in after it's developed. And then whatever you think is adequate into February or March.
Weekly.
Okay.
How about we just go weekly through February and then reevaluate at that point in time?
Okay. So I would think that between now and the 1st of February, which doesn't give us a lot of time, or even that first week of February, especially for the Manny's and the Herald, let's hit the Wednesday and Sunday both. And then we can back off to once a week, like all of the rest, for the month of February. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Can we read back the motion?
So I would make a motion that, get my calendar up here, I apologize, everybody. Okay, so tonight's the 16th. I would assume that we could probably get it into the Herald starting Wednesday, the 22nd.
Oh, yeah.
This Sunday probably would be difficult.
No.
'Cause I think their deadline for Sunday is Friday. Any Herald people here?
I think it's Thursday.
Thursday, so it's
Which is on
today.
Saturday.
Let's shoot for Wednesday. So for the Manny's / Herald, let's look at the 22nd, the 26th, the 29th, and February 2nd, and then go weekly after that.
Are you going to, oops?
And the Herald Review.
And, Mr. Chair, are you going to have basically a list of dates and times of all meetings? Are we going to put this in, or we're going to say next meeting, we're going to try to time it? Or should we have just a calendar?
Yeah, my thought there was to have them all.
Oh,
It's
fine.
blocked
Yep.
here
Yep.
it is.
Yep,
Okay,
I agree.
because if I can't make it on this day in Harris Township, I can go to Blackberry on this day, or I can go to Big Fork on that day. Okay.
So then to continue with the motion, if we've got the Herald, Manny's, we would do once a week with the Scenic Range. And I think their publications are Thursday.
Yeah.
So we would have time for next week. And then the Hibbing Daily,
I would say.
Same
once a week?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I'll
So-
support that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. That motion carries. Number 3, presentation of commissioner options. Lucas
Mr. Chair.
Thompson.
Just real quick, I'd like to mention 2 other things, kind of related to number 2. We have put a new live web page on with specific to the jail, and that is in the packet here. We talked to a citizen this week, and it's a great idea that we put this link out on our Facebook page as well, so we will be getting that out there as well. But this will be the most up-to-date things as commissioners schedule copy with the counties. This will get updated every day as we get the information in. So we will get that out there, but it is in your packet. And for the listening audience, it's co.itasca.mn.us/792/new jail facilities. And then lastly, we do need to talk about the survey, how that is going to be structured for the questions, so we can get that moving as quickly as possible as well. So looking for input on what important questions you might have, and how we want to get that thing done.
Mr.
Chair.
Ayers.
So with the survey, Brett, great surveys are 2-minute surveys, 3-minute surveys, 8 to 12 questions. I guess multiple choice on some things, some essay style ones, I guess on others. Time frame there really is, it needs to be up and running by January 28th. So I mean, if that's the first day we're gonna hand this out, so there's your deadline. Yeah. I mean, we can come up with ideas on what needs to be on it, but I think a Survey Monkey, something along that line where, I only can do this one time, it knows who I am. It doesn't allow me to do it 15 times, so.
Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you. So are we considering that whatever we come up with for questions on the survey, that we also could have a printed version and take that with us so that can be completed at our meetings? And then they also could make any other comment that they want to make? Okay.
It would be best, Mr. Snyder, if it was one way or the other, but, some people don't have
Right.
Wi-Fi at their house or broadband, and you should be able to give them another option.
Sure.
Yep.
For those that want. I agree.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So if that is the deadline working back, we would need to receive submissions for that survey when?
I would say if we can get them to us by the 24th,
Okay.
it won't take long to get a survey tool built and something out, so.
Yep.
All right, that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anything else here? If not, we'll move on to presentation of commissioner options. Lucas, you have the floor.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Skiles. I was asked at the last meeting here to work with Contegrity and Clan McCarthy to fine tune 2 concepts that were presented at the last meeting. So in the last 2 weeks, we have fine tuned that concept to what was given to the commissioners tonight and the packets in the back for the public. With that said, I have Larry from Contegrity with me. I've got Scott and Ryan from Klein McCarthy to help with the presentation on the product that they produced. And along with them, I have Tim Thompson from the DOC if any questions from the Department of Corrections come up during this process. At this time, I'll turn it over to Larry.
I think I'll have Scott start off by just going over the concepts before I go through the numbers.
Okay, good evening. These are the 2 commissioner options that were given to us. We didn't call them anything fancier than the orange and blue options. Those were the colors that they came to us in. So I'll run through the site plans of these, how we got to that on the floor plans, and then Larry can go through the pricing on here. So a couple different things that I would just want to point out on the orange option. That had originally been shown to include the alleyway. We took with the utilities that are there, we didn't need that space for the development, so we really moved off of that alleyway. So this gives you a shape of the building, not necessarily of the site, but just to make note of that we did not take the alleyway. All of these options are to the west, so that's one of the clear distinctions with what we had shown before with east and remote. The blue option really was taking more of the, rather than just going to the west to the alleyway, the blue option really was using more of the southern block and taking the south alley and taking half of Northeast First Avenue. So the difference, the idea with this, one of the big ideas is you'll see in the plans that we do need to use the alleyway for access to the vehicle sally port in both options if we're using any bus traffic. And in this one, we'd also need to come through the parking lot of the fire station. So that's the biggest difference between the orange and blue is the amount of site. We're showing the basement, not a lot of work going on in the basement, really just the, with the jail, we designed it so that the food service can be done inside the secure perimeter of the jail. What that'll allow the facility to do is use inmate labor so that they can save some costs on the meals, rather than trying to use outside food service existing location and then trying to move that food into the jail and then checking for contraband and things like that. You could still use work release inmates there, but again, you really need to be checking the contraband. So best practices would be to locate the food service within the jail. Not saying that it absolutely has to be, but that's the way we projected it. And then remodeling the basement. It looks the same in the orange and blue option, but basically remodeling those food service areas to convert those into storage and staff locker. Excuse me, on the first level, what we're trying to do is as we're building to the west, we're looking at getting that inmate elevator. We're trying to access to a new courtroom on the second level above the annex. So to locate that elevator, we're locating it just outside the building. So we're not trying to take it up through the existing structure. So that's located just outside, and then ideally in this option we've got the intake area, intake and release, accessible to that elevator. So we can take right from holding cells into the elevator up to the courts. Then attached with that, the vehicle sally port in this, we can access right from the street, drive through for cars or buses, and then back out on the street. So that's really how this area was configured. Again, revolving around that secure elevator to get up to the court and then building out from that. Part of the Sure,
So,
Commissioner.
question, I don't know if
Where
I
is
heard
that?
you correctly or not. You said they're going to back out onto Fifth Street? They'll come into this alley?
They can drive through
So
and then
drive-through.
come out the other side. So
Gotcha.
they would not have to back out in this
Thank you.
option.
Yeah.
In this, the way the staffing is set up, when we did the programming to try to limit the amount of staffing, I believe Lucas talked about this at one of the previous meetings, was having the intake officer also doing the rounds on these two smaller housing units, both 18 beds, one being a work release and one being special needs. So those are grouped right next to intake. And then from there, really, we've got control that can look into the intake and release area, but also is that public lobby reception. So that really starts setting where control was, and then we want control to be able to see down these corridors. So we've got visitation on this side, jail administration with accessible public lobby. Once we work our way down the corridor, we've got the 3 different housing units, 2 direct supervision and 1 40-bed indirect. And then we've got the programs centrally located for those folks to use those, medical centrally located. And then down this corridor, we really have all of the service functions. So we have the receiving, food service, laundry areas, and some mechanical. So what that allows us to do is all of our receiving can be done off of the street. Trucks can back in right to receiving. That's the bulk of the stuff is going to general storage, laundry, food service area. That's the first level. Any questions on that? I'll just keep going unless you raise your hands. Okay, on the second level, what you're seeing is the upper level of the housing. So that's the cell areas on all of those 5 housing units. So that's what you're seeing as the floor area. That's the way Larry's calculated his stuff. And then an upper level mechanical area. So that's the only part that's built up above the, on the second floor. The areas between the cells, these are all open 2-story, open to below housing units, and then the rec area. When we get over to attaching to the, above the annex, we have that secure elevator that brings us up, and that puts us right at a holding area on the second level and right into the arraignment courtroom. And I know there was some conversations on having that be arraignment and a secure courtroom. Biggest difference between that is the arraignment courtroom typically doesn't have a jury box in it, but you certainly could size it larger, put the jury box in there, and give it some dual function. The lines on here, what we've got is really showing the different inmate movements in black, the public in green, and the judicial movements in red, so that you do get an idea, even in this option, to get to the one secure new courtroom. We don't have any inmate crossing judicial paths, but if we do bring them up to any existing courtrooms, they do start to cross. So I just wanted to make sure that we pointed that out. We have dashed in an area to the north if a second courtroom does fit there, and that's working those between the structural bays. So we can get 2 side by side on the second level. You could do the same thing on the third level. So what we're doing in that, we checked with structural, and the ability to do that is on the first level, we have multiple column bays. What we would do on the second level is where the courtrooms are, is leave out 1 row of columns. So then the others would have to be double checked for, because they're going to carry extra weight. But it sounded like we'd be able to do that. So that would at least, so we don't have columns within the courtrooms. So that's a key feature. Yes, Chair.
You know, Mike, so your last drawing about this area, I mean, there was columns every 8 feet. You know, basically an 8-foot square, you've got 4 columns. So you're saying that second floor now, no columns?
No, what I would say is they're about 22 feet or so apart. And what we would do is on the south edge of this courtroom, there's a row of columns. We would go ahead and stack that with what's below. In the middle of the courtroom, we'd leave out that in the east to west direction. We'd leave that row of columns out of the courtroom. And then on the north wall of the courtroom, there's another row of columns. If we're doing courts holding, that would fit between a bay of columns. And then we'd have another courtroom where we'd leave out a row. So essentially, I think there's 6 rows of columns in there in the east-west direction. We'd leave out 2, the 2 that would run through the courtrooms. When we get to the 3rd floor, what we're doing is extending that up so that we've got the inmate elevator. We're also using that elevator for any ADA judge access that would come through the judicial corridor of the existing courthouse. Through the small addition, they can use the stair to go down to the 2nd level, or they could use the secure elevator if they're ADA. Same thing, if we have another inmate we're bringing up and we're not using the courtroom on the 2nd level, we would bring the inmate up in that elevator and then go back through the judicial corridor to access the other the existing courtrooms in the 3rd floor of the courthouse. So that, again, the inmate and judicial paths do cross. They are sharing the same area. We're not cleaning that up. But that's one of the best solutions for that location. Okay, that's the orange option. Getting into the blue option, like I said, the basement is the.
Just one mind. Can I question? Can I ask questions?
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
It's your time.
All right. On your 2nd floor, you added a new courtroom.
Yes.
And some jury support. We haven't done anything on the 3rd floor.
Within the courthouse, correct.
Correct, okay. So what's the cost savings for not slapping that next courtroom on top too?
Larry can go through that. I believe he
Okay,
has.
Larry, so there's
yep.
one question that's all right, you can answer it later.
Yeah.
But there's one question I'm gonna ask you on that one.
So he does have that 2nd courtroom in his budget numbers, so you can see that. And then also, if you wanted to do some remodeling, some ADA upgrades, that's been priced out in the blue option, but certainly could be done in the orange option here also.
Okay. And before I let go of my time here, your 1st floor, so it would be page 3 in your little packet here.
Mm-hmm.
So you got your central control area. You know, I kind of understand the 1st to the 2nd, but so explain to me a little bit more about, you know, you have direct and indirect. So my direct is I'm seeing you. I can sit at a certain area and I'm seeing you in the cell.
Correct. The 2 units to the west, these 2 that I'm showing here,
Yep.
these are direct supervision, which basically means an officer will be stationed within the housing unit. So their desk would be right here and right here. So as they're sitting in the housing units, interacting with the inmates, just as I would be with you right now. If you're trying to visualize it, the cells kind of wrap around the same way that your elevated desk is here. So the officer is in there doing their rounds, so that's direct supervision. So the state allows for, since you're in direct contact with them, they allow 1 staff post for every 60 inmates. So those are sized at 60 inmates.
So indirect?
The indirect, there isn't an officer in here, so the person doing the rounds would be a rover that might be escorting inmates to booking or to programs, depending on that path. So there's no officer sitting directly inside of there, but they certainly could be setting in here. But this has multiple subdivisions. So if you're picturing that, I might be in a desk area here, but then there's walls in between and glass in between us. So this commissioner might be in one unit, 2 commissioners in this unit, 2 of you in this unit. So there might be 4 separate units there, so the inmates don't interact. So now I'm physically sitting and monitoring you from outside the housing unit. So that's really, I'm indirectly supervising you because we don't have direct physical contact with you.
Okay.
And in that supervision, you're allowed to go 1 staff post for every 40.
Okay.
Commissioner Tindquist.
2 questions. Are both these options still considering 200 beds?
They are very close. The blue option is slightly less. And when I show you that, it's because we're trying to use the first floor of the annex for some of the inmate housing and some of the intake. So because of that, the work release housing isn't 2 levels, so it's slightly less beds, but they're comparable. I think we lose around 10 beds or so out of that. But so it's probably 196 to 206.
Second question kind of goes back to Lucas. About a month ago, a couple meetings ago, you were talking about we could build these out, but then not staff one pod. So in this scenario here, one of these orange ones, we just leave unstaffed if it came to that, or we.
Correct. You could take one of the direct or indirect. You could choose not to open it at that time. We wouldn't open it. We would open the rest of the facility, and at a later time, the board could vote and work with the Department of Corrections to open up the other pod, if that choice is made by the board.
Okay.
Mr. Snyder.
So,
I forgot my question.
Mr. Adams.
Too much time has passed.
the orange is 196 beds?
The orange is 206.
206, not 196. The blue
Correct.
is,
The blue is 196.
blue is 196. Okay.
My question was the numbers, Mr. Chair.
And it certainly can be reconfigured and adjusted, but the biggest difference is really just because the work release that's utilizing the annex isn't 2 levels, just a single level. Okay, go into the blue. So in the blue, I mentioned the basement is the same philosophy again, moving the food service into the facility and remodeling those areas. In the blue option, we're closing half of the street. So in this option, we do still have access for cars to come around and loop into the vehicle sally port and then exit out through the north. If you were doing a bus, you would either have to drive in and back out, or you would need to come down through the alleyway and utilize the fire station parking lot to be able to get across that and then into the sally port and then drive out to the north. That's one of the drawbacks of this option of trying to get intake area close to where that secure elevator is. What this does, you see in this is a little different. In the orange option, it's the new area is a little bit bigger because we have more of the jail is built new. In the blue option, more of the jail is pushed into the existing annex. So in the orange option, we've got a couple training rooms instead of intake. So those are a little different in that regard. But same philosophy, that what we're trying to do is get that inmate elevator by the intake area so that we can securely move the inmates up. So the upper floor is very similar. This one here, due to the skinniness of the site, it gets a little bit more angles in here. The circulation areas aren't as clear as the other ones. They're not as straightforward. But we do still have the same kinds of things happening. We still have central control. In this solution, they can't see into intake and release as they could in the orange, but they are seeing the inmate corridors, and they are still the reception area and assisting people that are in the lobby, the public lobby. They're still seeing down the inmate corridor. So in this solution, we have the housing at the end of the run, and then in between we have the different programs, food service and support functions in this. So those are the biggest differences in this. Receiving would end up being off of the alley and working that into there. So those are the biggest differences in that first floor. Future, both of these have a way to expand future. In the orange option, it would have expanded to the west. You'd close the alley. In this option, it would expand most likely to the north through this service corridor, and you'd be expanding there. So there is a future direction for each of these to be able to expand. I think orange is probably a little cleaner than what the blue is, but both accommodate that. On the second level, again, you see the upper cell areas and the mechanical rooms in between those. That's the only build-out above the new addition. And then again, you see the secure elevator going up to the transfer area. And in this option, there are 2 courtrooms up here. That was one of the directives of the blue. So the inmates will come up and then go into the court's holding and then go into either courtroom. So in this solution, you have 2 completely secure courtrooms. In the orange option, you have 1, but certainly could do 2 if you did an adjacent one similar to this. So they both have that, and both options should be able to expand vertically if we check the structure on that. We're expecting that you could do that, so you could put another pair above these if you wanted to down the road. Third level, again, we're extending that elevator up so that we can have ADA access and inmate movement to the existing courtrooms, and also judicial movement down to the second floor. In this option, the entire third floor of the courthouse is shown in green. So that's showing Larry's got numbers in there to account for all of the remodeling that was in there. So he's got the square footage to do some ADA upgrades and some things there. So those are probably some of the bigger differences there.
These are, Scott, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Sure.
Scott, you have total remodel of the third floor in the blue option and none in the orange option.
That was our understanding of the differences that
The 2 commissioners.
that the 2 commissioners.
They're the ones who.
The
tried
orange
to
and
do
blue.
it that way.
Correct. Each could be done. You certainly could go to the orange option and remodel the third floor. I think there is potential with some design work and looking at this in more detail. I think there could be potential. We do have a courtroom on the west side here that if we can get access into that corridor, we might be able, we're still going to have some cross traffic of judicial and inmate, but I think there we could try to get that one a little more secure than what it is right now. So I think that gives you a little bit of, again, you can do that in both of the options.
Mr. Chairman.
So having said that, if you compared the remodel from the blue and the orange, if they were both remodeling that third floor, the bottom line costs would be very similar.
The costs for the third floor for the remodeling should be identical.
Right, but I mean, you don't show it in the orange, so if you had that in the orange, the 7 million for
Oh,
remodeling.
in Larry's pricing? Yeah.
This pricing, I mean, they would both be around 60 million.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Okay. Yeah, they're very comparable in what they're doing. The orange, probably some of the biggest differences are really how the annex is used. In the orange, you pick up some meeting rooms that were, when we were doing the program, we were figuring that more of it would be built to the east or remote. So some of those meeting rooms that the jail staff would be using, those were really part of the law enforcement program. So they weren't in here. So there are some things in locker rooms, staff locker rooms. There are some things that were outside of this program that would work their way back in depending on the location. So it really the blue uses more of the existing space for jail functions, where the orange option really was using some of those to pick up those meeting rooms and things like that. So that skews why the orange option has more new building for the jail versus the blue.
Other questions?
Want to jump into the costs?
I think we should.
Good evening. I'm here to go through my analysis of the costs based on the plans that Scott put together. As you said, we've got the orange option and the blue option. I will go off to say this is our estimate. Basically, we look back at historical numbers. The cost per square foot that we did utilize on the jail is similar to what you saw in previous October estimates. The differences being on the jail, the new addition, the 38 million to the 36 million on the blue is the change in square footage. The blue option takes up a little bit less square footage. I think it's about 72,000 whereas the orange option is in the neighborhood of 77,000. The remodeling, the difference there is obviously the difference of type of construction that we looked at. The first floor annex is being built secure space, jail function with actually housing cells in there, whereas the orange option puts it back to more of a meeting room, training room, and there's actually a room in there that is to be determined for a future. The courts construction, the two options on that Scott showed, one was the entire second floor would be shelled in. I mean, it's going to all good be enclosed. So the difference basically is the finishing off of that second courtroom, which I think answered your question. Let me switch to that. Is that how I switch to Scott?
You can just scroll the mouse, dude. Just use the wheel there.
There you go. On the option that we have up right now, which is the orange option, the entire area is being built out and shelled. The difference between that and the blue option is that we're finishing off that second courtroom and finishing off the rest of the non-colored space. So once we started calculating numbers and we were going into the shelled space, it's not that big of a number difference between the two, basically about 1.3 million. Because even if we did shell it, we would have went ahead and sized mechanical, HVAC, and everything else to finish it down the road. So you're really looking at the finishes, the judges' benches, the jury, the room itself. So,
But for clarification,
Yeah.
Larry, just, the orange option is one courtroom and the blue option is two courtrooms.
correct.
Okay.
And, and Larry, you're saying you would shell it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Both options, there's a second floor complete. It's the finishes of finishing off the room itself.
Gotcha. Right.
Yeah. On the courts, the new construction has to deal with that level as well as the connection. On the remodeling side of it, the big difference is there's very little remodel. It's more of the connection on that north stairwell or that west stairwell that faces to the north. That's where we got a little bit of remodeling where we're going to make that connection. The big difference there is obviously the third floor is being renovated in the blue option in its entirety, which is about 20,000 square feet. Under the site development, the blue option, or excuse me, the orange option takes the fire hall, the varsity cleaners, and the center building, removes those. In the blue option, we're taking the minor building and the varsity and the cleaners. We basically got calculated that by Google Earth, figured out the square footage, figured out a volume, and came up with that. I know there was some mention about tipping fees. The county owns a landfill. There is a chance for some savings there. I think you'd save about 45 grand potentially on the $9 per tipping fee that you have, and about probably 65,000 on the blue option. The hazardous material abatement allowance, without having a survey, it's one of those numbers that you really you're taking a guess at. You don't even know if it has asbestos in there. There's some assumptions. You go into the fire hall, the truck storage area. Obviously, I don't think they got VCT or VAT, I should say, on the floor. But not having been in the other buildings, we did do an abatement project not that long ago, and I basically extrapolated some numbers off of that and came an average cost of about $4 a square foot, and that's what we got as a placeholder in that. Utility relocation. For street closure, actually the street's a pretty good street to close. We had a conference call with the city. We left that call that the water could be cut and capped at the site. They were thinking we're going to have to reroute the sanitary sewer over to North Pekegama. They sent us the plans, and after we studied them for a little bit, we questioned it because there's a manhole out west of the annex that actually flows north. It wasn't flowing through the property. And they got back to us and said, no, sewer and water both can be cut and capped. There is no gas main in the street. You really don't get into too much until you actually get to the alley where you got the power lines on the west side of the alley coming through. There's a 4-inch gas line. So we did allow a placeholder for some utility allowance in that blue option for cutting across that part of the alley. I do think the gas service actually just serves the buildings that are in there, but the utility lines and the power and stuff, besides what it serves, I think it extends across as well. So there's some money in there for that. The contaminated soil remediation, that took a little doing. I actually got the final numbers on that this morning, but we did reach out to a soils engineer. We did get the information that the varsity cleaners had a petroleum monitoring back, I think they stopped the monitoring about 10 years ago. But they came up and I got the language from the city that it had a combination of gasoline as well as petroleum oil underneath. They did a soil boring down 12 feet. They didn't hit anything until it hit 10 feet, but they terminated the auger boring at 12 feet. So really that 10 to 12 feet, they got us 2 feet that they identified it. But there's a process, and what I included what we see as worst case scenario. It's a 3-part study that'll need to be done. One's basically, the first study, number 1, is just getting the research on the property. It's a few $1,000s. Phase 2 is actually some environmental testing. It's potential that you get an environmental testing, they said, and that may end at you maybe only spend $10,000, $15,000 to find out. But they do find material. You then go into phase 3 as far as an implementation of a plan. And then you have to put that plan into place, such as soil excavation, which we got figured in there, that it's a 70 by 70 area by 10 feet deep once we find it. And then there's also another $5 a square foot for a soil vapor mitigation system, similar to a radon thing, but that runs about $5 a square foot. And knowing these footprints are about 60,000 square foot footprints that could potentially be under the entire building. They said it could be part of the building, but we got the 300,000 that potentially could be under. So that's how we made up with the 531. With that, the property purchase, I did nothing more than take 2.5 times the estimated market value for those parcels off the county GIS site. That's strictly a placeholder for that discussion, and that's how I came up with it. You see the subtotals there, the 52.9, the 60,954. Commissioner Trump pointed out, I think the big difference there is the 3rd floor renovation. You're picking up that additional square footage that you're renovating is primarily the difference. The jails, so far, we've looked at one back in October with 74,000. We have one plan here that at 72, plus you're picking up some jail space in the annex, and I think the orange option, we're in the 77,000, plus the property laundry area and, the property storage in the jail, or the annex remodel. So they're all, I think we're all coming into that 70-some thousand square foot jail construction. That's what's obviously driving the big chunks of the price, so. With that, I'm open to questions.
Commissioner Ives has a question.
Thank you for all your hard work. First off, I'll be very, your remodeling, I guess if you don't mind, I have numerous ones, Mr. Chair. Your remodeling layer, you got it's a $1.8 million swing here between the orange and the blue. I mean, is it all because of the annex building, or is it all because of the?
Are you talking on the jail remodel, the 4 million to the 6?
Yep.
Okay, that is the difference of the 2 types of construction. If you look at the blue option,
Yep.
you're actually putting holding cells in there. You're actually, basically that remodeling is inside of your secure perimeter, jail, detention, door control. Shifting those inside does not take away for some of those detention costs. Whereas on the orange option, you're talking a non-secure training room, a room that's labeled to be determined, and an open meeting room. So it's really the difference in the type of construction. I mean, if you've got 9 cells, I can tell you right now, you got $370,000 just in those 9 cells. Just the material side of it.
So I think to be simpler, Larry, is that it's not that you're eliminating some of these holding cells in one option or the other, it's just where they are placed, where they're being
You can't get 2
constructed.
stories out of it. That's, I think, what Scott presented there, is that it's just not a 2-story space, so you lose the upper part of it. But that's the driving factor, is the difference between the type of construction, that's the type of remodeling we're doing on that first floor.
All right.
Mr. Ives.
Your courts, your remodeling, you got $7.4 million in difference between the orange and the blue. As the blue, you're remodeling all of 3rd, which I guess Mr. Trump, maybe Mr. Trump can explain why he asked for that. But, and the other, you only have $177,000. 7.5 million to 175.
The difference between remodeling 20,000 square feet and impacting 488 square feet where the stairwell connects. That is
Okay,
different.
and all of 3rd floor.
All of 3rd floor, the only thing the orange option is where that tie-in is there, where you can see where the red arrow kind of stems to. There's
Yeah.
that little bit in that stairwell where we need to make that connection point. There's no other work in the orange option on third floor.
Mr. Trump?
Yeah, well, thank you, Commissioner Ives. I was a little bit surprised at the $7 million for the remodel. My intent was to have 2 courtrooms built upon the annex and then to remodel what we needed to do on the third floor to provide 2 more adequate courtrooms.
And ADA compliant.
Yeah, and so a little bit surprised that it came to that kind of a number.
Mr. Snyder.
So could I just ask, where did we come up with 2 courtrooms?
Well, the courts are saying that there's a 3.8 judge need and it's going to grow it to 4 and they need 4 courtrooms. And that was my,
And we have 3 plus a hearing room already on the third floor. Just throw that out as a point.
I will add that on the third floor here, on the remodel, I'm also figuring if you do spend the money in remodeling, you're gonna replace that roof. So I'm gonna have the roof. I have that roof being redone in the blue option.
okay, well, that's probably why it's,
Well, the roof needs to be done.
I'm
I mean-
not disputing it, but I know if you're gonna do a renovation below it,
Okay.
it would, I did calculate in that you would be replacing the roof under the blue option. It is not touching it on the orange option.
okay. Well, that's
All right.
what's driving it.
Mr. Chair, a couple more here. So I guess, not to cite development, nickel and dime you on what, here or there, I mean, you got $200,000 swings in a couple, your first 3, or your first 2, you're 200,000 on the orange to the blue, you got 75, again, from orange to blue, and then you have another 200 in utilities. One's taken in the alleyway, one's not. But the biggest one that kind of concerns me is your land property purchase allocations at 2.6 and 2.2.
2.5 times the estimated market value.
Oh, I understand how you got it.
Oh, okay.
No.
right.
I have concerns as a commissioner saying we're light.
Okay.
That's just me. I could see where that you might hit that number with the blue option. Might be a little light there.
It very well could be. Property estimation is not my,
I think with
Primary forte,
your
so-
orange, I think you're a little light,
Yeah.
but that's just me.
Yeah.
So that could be a swing of a couple million either way.
yeah, like I said, some of these are my best guess without
Okay.
walking into some of these buildings and seeing a asbestos survey. You could be all over the map on that. We have something in there. I can tell you how I based it, but it's the detail is going to tell you. Even on the building demolition, you can look at a building from the outside, but to fully vet it, you need to get into it and take a look at what type of construction. Is it a lot of open space, or is it a heavy type construction? And there's a bunch of variables that need to be detailed. But those are just steps on the way to do this. No different than square footages on these buildings. You have a program, you got a plan. And, as you start the design, if that starts to shrink and the efficiencies start to reduce some of things, those will all affect costs along the road here. But
Can I have one more? So Larry, your estimates, we're trying to be as efficient and as green and energy conscious as we can with these. You had that in your mind. We're not picking out the cheapest light. We're going right to an LED light. I mean, where we can get some cost savings and.
it's most new buildings. I haven't been in a new building that we've done for a government entity that isn't efficient, not only in the lighting, but even the boiler systems. We talked a little bit about, boilers. It's not just sizing the boilers. They actually even solenoid valves and control when you can take a shower so that you can downsize the boiler so that, you're showering between 7 and 8 in the morning, and this cells are between 8 and 9, and you're, low flow shower heads. And it all comes back to, in those cases, it actually saves the construction dollars because you don't have to have this massive boiler or massive hot water heater. Using natural daylight for, skylights, for example, with security bars, it doubles up as your smoke evac. So there's some definite things that I think we've done There's some very hard construction in a jail. I mean, it's not a residence by any stretch. It's hard, but it's well-built and can last a long time.
Mr. Chair, so down, and everybody, I guess, who has this in their possession, on your notes down there, number 2, we're not talking about underground parking. You haven't brought that up yet, nor has Scott.
No, it was, there was, outside of looking at parking, I heard it talked and mentioned about plus or minus 60 cars. I think you're looking then at about a 20,000, give or take, how structure or columns lay out in there. If you look at a parking lot design, you're looking at about 350 square feet per vehicle. That's what they usually allow with the drive lanes. So we're estimating that, if you throw a 20,000 square foot in there for a parking area underneath, it's going to be that 2.25 million. If you go smaller, it gets less efficient. If you get bigger, it gets a little more efficient. So it's a ballpark range. There was no plan that actually designed it that showed me entry in and entry out. I would eventually like to see it if that's a direction on how we're going to access the street or on and off, but it's a budget. And
Yeah. Hang on, Mr. Snyder, and we can go right back to it here. Just number 3, you've done your estimated based on open competitive bid markets.
Yeah.
And I guess number 4 here on this deal, your very last sentence there, no dollars budgeted for existing buildings. You want to explain that a little bit to me?
I understood that on the third floor. What I was really thinking on the third floor is that was renovated in 97 completely, and was at least indicated to me that any asbestos that may have been there would have been taken out. So once again, without having a survey done, even on areas we think there's no asbestos, we're going to have one done.
So it's no different. Every time you open up to do a remodel, it's a surprise.
You could
Okay,
find
so
something.
this is yours. It could be a surprise.
And within these numbers, I included on the new construction 10% contingency, and I think I got 15 in there on the remodels.
Okay.
So.
Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a point, if we were to consider underground parking, I'm assuming that would interrupt when you either enter or exit, that's going to interrupt your first floor in the layout of that first floor. Or it might.
Depending how it is. I mean, I know some of you have been up to Pennington, but that's kind of on the exterior of the building, but obviously it takes up real estate whether it does or it doesn't. So if you did something like you saw up in Pennington, there it is mostly outside before you get down to that grade where you don't actually interfere with the first floor. But you got a limited site. So your options on some of these plans are varies on where you can do it without chewing up some square foot. You're either going to chew up square footage outside or inside.
Inside, right. Gotcha.
I mean, I would probably like to see the orange option stay a little bit further back than Highway 2, and hopefully that's one of those 2 plans that we stay back a little bit further off that back of the sidewalk would be better. But this is conceptual at this stage, so.
So it seems like it'd be reasonable to say it would have an effect on first floor. Mr. Hines.
Yes. Explain that a little bit more, Mr. Chair. What did you?
If you've been to Pennington County, you'll see I think most of their interruptions on the exterior.
Yes.
It doesn't interrupt the floor plan, but as you tunnel under the building, your entry point or your exit point, if you're cramped for space, let's make an assumption you come off of Pekegama or 4th Street. You're not going to have a lot of swing room to go in. And so it would take up space in the building versus out on the street as you start to go down.
Yes.
And the question I have then is that interrupts the layout that was just presented, whether it's the blue or the orange, it doesn't make a difference, it's the same. But it would interrupt the floor plan then that's presented.
Larry, why did in Pennington, when they did their underground car, it was designed for 72 cars and only 38 fit. Why is that?
I honestly cannot answer that question. My brother Pete was the project manager who was involved with it from day one. I was not, so I don't know where that transitioned from. I know the construction plans came out with what you see in place now. So I don't know if there was something during the design that changed along the way. But I do know the project that was drawn, bid, and built is what you see today.
What was their price per stall?
Once again, it was incorporated into a lump sum bid with
Okay.
everybody, so it wasn't an alternate, so
Okay.
I can't pull
I
that.
think their total cost was 18 million.
Commissioners, one of the things with Mr. Thompson from Department of Corrections is here. Our understanding of it is any of the parking that would be below the jail can only be for restricted law enforcement parking, so it couldn't be general staff or public parking.
General staff is a no.
Courthouse staff, no.
I don't
Is it
believe
no?
so. Mr. Thompson could clarify. The access for either of these, we have the street that we're closing. If you're trying to do any ramping, you could get under the jail in both options along the south area. In the orange option, coming in next to the staff support, going down underneath the indirect. If we're allowed to keep that approach or move that approach just for that restricted area, or we could certainly look at, in the orange option, readjusting where on the northwest corner, readjusting that layout there as far as receiving and try to come in adjacent to that. So I think there's still room to work that in if that was one of the features that was so desired.
Other questions?
Are we good?
Mr. Adams?
No, you don't mind some of the structure of this. You show me the outside. What about mechanical? Is it both identical, blue and orange? Are we using anything from what we have now?
Not I would assume both the new construction and like the remodel would be new mechanical, and it would also be on the blue option where if you renovated the third floor, you'd be doing a new mechanical serving the third floor, but we would not be, I'm not considering impacting second or first floor.
Okay, so is that included
Which,
in your price tags here?
the remodel costs, it is, yes. For the area we're impacting, which basically is the area that we're highlighted. It's basically not highlighted or colored in on any of the options. We're assuming we're not touching it.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, and here's the reasons why I understand mechanical can eat up a lot of things really quick, and that's how you can make your building some really efficient concepts. But I guess my questions were, this third floor, we got a leaky roof, we have an ADA compliant problem, and we have a security problem. At least that's what the judges have said to us. So I guess you were not, Scott or Larry, you were not directed to address the court's situations? No, they weren't. Okay.
No, we did not address anything outside of what you see on these drawings.
David?
To that, either of these options here, I see some opportunity for phasing in. So we could choose to bite it all off at once, or add that second courtroom as it's needed, or work through our other issues in a remodel situation, get what we have to actually do to meet the needs of the sunset letter and figure that in. So that'll be a decision that we have to make. Do we do it all at once, or do we phase this out too? So there's some opportunity here for that.
Yes, provides for options. Mr. Adams?
You don't mind, Mr. Chair? Dave and I, back in 2007, 60 rooms was 7.5 million to do basically the orange option. Is that my understanding? You drew it. Did
Say your question again?
Oh, back in 07?
Kind of.
It was kind of?
It was only a 60 bed.
Yeah.
It was a 60 bed,
It's not.
but it was 7.5 million? Yeah, what I'm bringing up is, to David's question was this, and I presume you drew it, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Were we very far off of what we were in 2007? Quite different?
Yeah, what we were adding there, it's quite different, because there we were building two-story just housing above the annex. So it didn't have any of the other support functions at all.
All right. Well, I guess my point here is, you're 7 times the price tag in 12 years. So, I mean, if we're gonna let things build it half and then 12 years from now, add on again, you know, whatever the cost was to add on the courtroom today, times it by 7 for 12 years from now.
Yeah, I think had you even done that housing, you'd still be in a little bit of the same boat because it's still the other parts of the jail that need upgrades to be able to stay functional. So you'd still need to go in there and do that remodeling and do more extensive repairs and things. Even had you built that housing on there, the other parts of it weren't figured in for any remodeling costs. So you'd still be facing that decision today.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Trent?
So, Mr. Chair, I guess what I'm hearing Burl say is, but we're trying to address in the blue plan some of the issues that we have with the third floor. As David said, maybe we can put that off. I don't know if that's a wise thing because costs will go up down the road. So that's one of the things we got to consider is how much do we do, but how much do we lose by waiting years down the road because of increased costs?
Seems as though this would be the time to identify those things. Well, yeah. You should. Mr. Snyder?
Well, I think it is, and it's a lot to get your arms around and make those decisions. But again, we go back to what was our basic chore here, and that was to create a jail. And obviously, we need to take into account those other things and do what we can as long as we have the means to do it. One thing that I'd like to, if we can address it tonight, is that, we really haven't talked about what the size should be. And, we've heard a lot of different variables across the 5 or 6 meetings that we've had. And now tonight, the blue option is 196 and the orange option is 206. And again, I'd like to hear a little more, maybe from Lucas. And again, just kind of correlate that with staffing again, so you refresh our memories on, if it's reduced to 180, is that the same amount of staffing that you'd have with 206? And, how does that all play in with each other here?
Lucas, your thoughts?
Depending on the design, the staffing is going to be very similar between the two. It's 1 to 40, 1 to 60 is how we've set up the concepts. So you're really not gaining much. You're not losing any staff costs by cutting it down to, let's say, 180 beds. You're going to still have the same staff costs, you're just going to have staff watching less inmates.
So if it's, Mr. Chair, if I may, if it's reduced below 180, does that?
Well, you basically have to drop a pod if you want to save staffing. So you'd have to drop a 40-bed pod or you'd have to drop a 60-bed pod.
To reduce staffing?
Because you'd have to clear a post. A post is 5 staff. So you'd have to clear one of the posts to reduce the staffing. And my recommendation, if you're going to do that, would be to drop one of the 60 beds. The 40-bed indirects are multiple sub-classifications, and they make for flexibility and swinging.
Right.
The 60-bed does not. It's more efficient on staffing, but it doesn't give us the ability to swing. So if we're looking to dump anything, it would be one of the 60 beds. So that'd take you down to 140. And March of last year, we had 148 inmates in custody in Itasca County.
Gotcha.
Good. Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Lucas, no. So I'm looking at this one here, part of the handout today. Space analysis, remote site, green site. So the jail, these are 198 jail, 198 beds. Okay.
In that ballpark. When we sit down with the architect and start actually doing the schematic, stuff is going to change. Stuff's going to shift around a little bit for efficiency. The variable on some of these is the intake room, because we have intake housing in there that's not considered permanent housing, so it's not even part of the count, because it's not housing. We use it for changing over and monitoring during that process before we move them. It doesn't have a day room, a rec area built into it. It's not part of the housing count. But adjacent from that is where we have in ours the min security and our special management setups, our special needs setups. So that post actually oversees all of that area. So we try to get the 40 beds with inside that for that particular person instead of being like a 60-bed pod where you just sit inside.
Commissioner Ives, just to add, the program is set up for the green site and the orange site. The program is set up on 206 beds. The blue site was a little less just because they didn't fit within there. Certainly that would need some more revisions to try to get those extra beds, but the program is set up for 206.
But we do have Mr. Thompson from the DOC here who could speak to what he thinks Itasca could possibly need for housing capacity, if that would help.
I would love to hear from him, but before you leave the podium,
Yes, sir.
if you don't mind, your off-site remote sites, you know, you had square footage. Your square footage all of a sudden is a little different on each deal. Your blue is 72,000 square feet, your orange is 77. This is jail. Your jail on an off-site was 74. So we're kind of in the middle of both. But your court facility, the 55 for a new one off-site green. What am I at with this remodel deal? Do you have any idea?
How many square feet the remodel is?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can answer that later.
I think the courts floor is little over 19,000 for the courts floor, square feet.
Okay.
The numbers that you see on the remote site, those were the program numbers from the work that we did up here. So that's where we stopped in those programs. When you see a different square footage, when it goes from the program to actually start laying it out on the site, different shapes will get you different efficiencies, more or less circulation corridors or things like that. So you do see those numbers going up or down depending on how efficient it is or how constricted it is or different things like that. So you will see that program can't always be identical. So that's what's happening in it. The blue is it had that angled corridor, it had some different inefficiencies in there.
Why I'm asking is basically this, you know, your old courtroom, you have a square footage of basically 19,000 square feet. You are gonna have to do a little bit of a remodel, add some, so on and so forth, and then on your green space, but you got your court facilities at 55,000 square feet, double the size as what we have now.
Yeah, in the courts facility program, it had probation was in there. It had court administration, judicial, chambers, jury. So it had all of those support functions included with it, where if you start remodeling, depending on how much remodeling you do or how much building you do, you're not always accounting for all of those pieces.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
Mr. Lucas Thompson, I'm just curious to get your professional critique and opinion on the plans that were presented today.
Well, I'll only speak on the jail parts of the designs, because that's all
please.
I work with. The orange design is more efficient from a jail standpoint. The way it lays out, the efficiencies in the space works better for a jail. I won't speak to any of the court functions.
Thank you. Mr. Tinquist first.
And a follow-up to that, I think, my opinion, for what we need to decide, whether it's orange or blue, it shouldn't matter. Same cost, once we figure into the remodeling right here. I mean, you can tweak a little bit here and there, but once we get to a point where we have to make a decision, this is a direction we're gonna go. I think it's up to them to decide design, layout, and what works best for them. It's hard. I don't have any experience on a jail piece. Terry's got a little bit, but to say this works and this doesn't work, so.
Leo.
I was just wondering if we could hear from the DOC and see what his thoughts were as far as our staffing needs for the future or for the beds and how many.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Chair, Commissioners. In terms of what Mr. Lucas Thompson had just mentioned in terms of efficiencies, I would concur with that. As I look at the plans, just at first blush, without having a real solid design just in this schematic phase, I have identified that it appears that you'd be about 1.5 posts higher in staffing with the blue plan, because you've got that angled corridor and you've got intake and release and work release areas off in a different area, which really makes staffing less efficient, because those people are going to have, you can't really pull them out of that side to help with anything. Whereas the orange plan, it's more compact in terms of supervision. So when you talk about one post, like Jail Administrator Thompson had said, it's 5 bodies per post. When we look at 1.5, you're really talking about 8 bodies. Now factor that in based on, your wages and benefits, et cetera. That's significant. I mean, 8 bodies is a big deal. So when you talk about staffing efficiencies, I would definitely concur that the orange is considerably more efficient on those issues. When he had mentioned about what you need for beds, I actually do not have that data in terms of what your bed needs are. So that would be something that you'd really look to your architect or your consultants to help you determine. And some of that's based upon what you're boarding out today, what you may be boarding out in the future, those kinds of things. So I don't have that data to answer that, to have an educated answer on that for you.
Mr. Abs?
Did you get a good chance to look at what the task force gave out for the options? We'll call it drawing number 1 and drawing number 2. This will be 3 and 4 to me. But have you had a chance to digest that? And
I'm not sure I'm understanding.
oh, so you had a green site, you had
Okay.
we'll call it an eastern downtown site over
Okay.
here, where you purchased a couple of blocks and built on a block and on your parking lot. And did you see them? And
I have, without having those here with me to compare in terms of staffing, I wouldn't be able to give you a good answer on that. But I could look at those again and get back to you.
would love that. Yeah, I meant
And please keep in mind, it's preliminary staffing. Some of what we do is when we're looking at space adjacencies, we can try to identify posts and what's efficient. We do our best with that, but as the plans become more detailed, those staffing numbers can change. It may be by 1 or 2 bodies. The other thing that it does that we'll look at is, I heard some talk about phasing, and if we open at various capacities, that can impact what you need now versus, there might be, you might open a second pod down the road a year from now or 6 months from now, depending upon what your capacity needs are. And then you might have, another shelled-in space or something that gets finished, and that changes your staffing again. But we can do staffing breakdowns at various points throughout your phasing and how things become complete and how you want to operate those.
Any questions for Mr. Thompson? Mr. Skiles?
Tim, can you talk a little bit about the DOC's approval process of our plans and how that might work? I mean, we could draw all these nice lines, but you guys ultimately have to say, yeah, that will work, and go ahead.
The benefit of what you have going right now is that we're involved at this point. We have had numerous situations where we don't, the county or the architect or, the buyers, they say, well, we'll bring them in when it's time to approve the plans. And that becomes a very long process. Statutorily, we have 30 days to look at your plans and approve them. The way you guys are going about this right now is we've been involved fairly significantly even at the schematic phase. So by being able to see your staffing and have an understanding of your staffing, understanding what products are going in, whether you're doing concrete masonry construction or whether you're doing steel cells or whatever. We've run through all those different scenarios, on 50 different projects. So by having us involved now, we work closely with the architect and the construction managers, and we will have a very good understanding of your process and your plans and what's needed and what's going into it. When that time comes that we get the construction documents for approval, and it can go pretty quickly. I don't see any problems with approving your plans based on how you've gone about the process to this point. Mr. Chair, if I may, I would also like to thank Commissioner Tinquist for his comment on allowing the jail people to do the design. We have run into a number of projects where they kind of get handed a project and say, here's what you get. And that can be problematic when it comes to operations of the facility. So I would like to thank you for your comments on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff Williams, would you like to address the board?
Just want to follow up with the concurring with Lucas on the orange concept. This isn't picking sides of whoever's plan is what, but when I look at it, I want to also keep in mind with the board from an overall operations perspective is the fact that everybody's talked about the 3 floors on the annex and that type of stuff. With hearing the rearranging of the columns and things like that, if there's an option to shell in or prepare future court sites, it's critical that you guys keep that in your minds as far as if there was a possibility to create the 2 courtrooms, that concept in the blue drawing where it shows that the 2 court facility rooms are on that 2nd floor above the annex, and preparing a 3rd floor that would mirror that, similar, but put it in the orange plan, I think that's critical. Because I think we have to keep in mind what we're going to do to address the courts, simply because that would pull the courts into the secure facility. That would make it part of a new design, and it would make access to those rooms as, and we'd also complete a long time nagging thing about putting them 3 floors on that. If it can handle them court facilities, and we can at least even shell them in as part of this project for future expansion, I think it's important to try to remember that and get those figures from Contegrity now. I would also like to say what David said is that Lucas knows these numbers. These guys watch us and operate in this every day. They know what we need, and they know where we're headed, and they know what it takes to operate now short of all the space and needs that we have. So the way you're going about this, the concepts of allowing the square footage, of looking at the amount of beds we need, that is where we need to stay on target. Don't care where we take this picture and put it. Put it out on a beautiful park site. If you put it next door here, right to the west, as long as we accommodate upgrading and meeting our requirements.
David.
Follow up on that, Vic. As we roll this out to our open houses, can you and your staff provide us with, I think what we'll want to do is provide, here's our options. We've gone from this green site build, all out LEC, down to no jail. What's it going to cost us to transfer prisoners? Just so the public's aware of what that cost is. We have some sort of cost. I don't have the numbers in my head, but it's like $30,000 a month right now we're spending. But I couldn't tell you how many you're shipping out. But if we could get that on paper as to here's how many we're already.
Well, it's critical. Once the county board picks the target and picks the value, then it's starting to talk about making sure that the public's aware of what'll make the most or the least impact upon the taxpayers. And if you have this where you are trying to do the plan, for us to have a basic facts information sheet that lays it out in layman's terms from start to finish, not a 45-page thing, you want something that lays out timelines and of how we got to where we're at. From doing nothing to a $70 million project, that's a green site brand new from top to bottom, how we kind of pulled everything into the middle, and this is what we need to target. That's the part we have to try to go after. And to have a sheet that would explain that, you don't want it too generic where you hand it to them and don't tell them anything, but you can't get to what you're handing from Contegrity where it's so convoluted that it makes no sense to them. So we'll work on that. We are getting invitations from all over the county to talk to different business groups and what have you. So we're looking at preparing something to hand out so the public and you guys and Lucas and whoever has something to hand to people so they can read up on how we ended up where we're at and what the county board's looking at doing.
Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Vic, I think where Commissioner Tinquist was going is that we've all fielded a couple questions about, don't do anything. Let's just house them all out. We don't need to build a jail. So, if, in that fact sheet that you're going to create for us, if you could just put in there, your 120 prisoners times your daily rate times 365, it gives us something we can show the public that says, here, this is what's going to cost annually. And then try to factor in your transport with that.
When you talk about the, I suppose I should say it for just a second, but when you factor in the growth and the potential that was done in 2007, where they were going to do a 60-bed add-on, you got to remember that was allowing a linear jail to continue to function. That was still allowing 100 beds to go and occupy what we could in the annex, and then doing a 60-bed unit to add more housing. That would have been around that 170 mark back then. So this 206 is critical. We are housing a lot of people out, and the growth rate isn't going the opposite way. So I think that's one of the things that there's been no decrease in the amount of inmates that were occupying our spaces.
Commissioner Tinquist, to answer your question, we will put together the fact sheet, and myself and the Assistant Jail Administrator, Sean Racine, would be happy to attend any meeting, whether it's after a county or a city meeting, a township meeting. All you got to do is email us, and we'll attend, and we'll bring data with us as well, because we can answer most of the questions and make it easier.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Lucas. That's important to show every option, and doing nothing is an option. And being able to communicate the cost of that is important. So appreciate being able to use that data in these presentations. Mr. Ives.
January 28th, Lucas, John, Harris Township.
Be there.
Okay, thank you. Can I, Mr. Chair, may I ask
Go
one
ahead.
more question? Looking out long-term, and I guess maybe Scott or Larry, option B, or blue, the blue option, the only option you said basically is to buy the fire hall. The orange, the only other option would be to buy the old North Print building for any future expansion, say 12 years from now, I need another 60 beds. Or the county needs 60 more beds. But am I understanding that right? There is no building upward, second, third floor?
That's possible.
We had laid it out for horizontal expansion. We certainly can plan for vertical. The issue with that is we're daylighting, getting all of our natural light requirements through skylights. So none of this has exterior windows. So once you add above it, we lose that natural light. So if that was going to be an option, we certainly would want to plan for that now and then reconfigure the first floor and second floor so that we could get natural light to the back of the cells. So you'll see a little bit more jogs in the building so that we can do that. Because if we go vertically, we'd be limited in this option because you'd lose those skylights, and we can't lose those. So that would be the biggest change, but it certainly could still be looked at vertically. Horizontally is usually less expensive.
Okay, thank you. Concern of mine, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't
Good
need to,
question.
15 years from now, ask ourselves, where are we gonna go? We're short.
I think addressing and talking about the expansion space is a big part of this. Absolutely.
Yep.
So we've received the presentations, had a great discussion here, asked a lot of questions. What's the pleasure of the board moving forward? Mr. Snyder.
Just a concern. So as we move forward, and obviously Commissioner Ives is the first one, he'll have his open house at Harris Township, is that, how many options do we bring? I mean, do we narrow down those that are alike, those that are on one side of the building or the other, and narrow it down to one option that attaches to the courthouse and one that's a green space, or what do we do? I mean, again, I think, time is valuable right now, and are we spinning our wheels by being as inclusive as we've been so far and adding all four of these, or do we just bring two to the public? We make decisions and bring two to the public.
Good point. Mr. Trent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From my perspective, I think we've seen results, or we know the results of two options. If we go to the full justice center, it's 68 to 70 million. If we go with no jail, Katie bar the doors, it's gonna be real expensive. So really, in my mind, I think we bring the options of the blue and the orange to the public. Because that's more in the middle of what the costs are gonna be, and we may have to adjust what we do with those options, but I mean, we can certainly talk about those far-ranging costly options, but I think that's what we present in my mind.
Mr. Ives?
Mr. Chair, I'm not in favor of the blue and the orange being my only two options to building a new jail. Not at all. If you want to pick, I guess if you want to eliminate one of these two, pick it. And then I think you should go to a green space. And I think you should probably do a re-talk about some of the cost savings and the possibility of decreasing your amount of buildings that the county owns to, let's be more efficient with what the county spends on buildings, heating buildings, so on and so forth. I know that the city is worried about this building being empty and not having anybody living or working down here in the city. That's one of their big concerns about the jail leaving this area. If Health and Human Services moved here, you would gain 70 people working out of this building. So I guess I'm not interested in throwing out the green site and no, I'm not interested in throwing that out. You want to pick one of these two to throw out? That'd be my suggestion. And my vote will be blue. So.
David?
Similar along those lines. To me, this is one option. Back to my comments earlier, for us to sit here and debate about which one is better than the other is probably beyond what we should be doing if the dollars are so close. This is one option that can be vetted. East would still be an option, and green site. You could go with three: green site, east, or west, because there's some advantages and disadvantages. Believe it or not, I have received support for green space option, but we're just not sure that that's what we can afford.
Mr. Snyder?
And I'll just respectfully disagree with that. I think these are two very separate, they're not the same. One is included in a third floor remodel in the courts, and again, I bring us back to our original task was to build a jail. And again, I respect the opinions of our employees that work in that jail every single day, and if their option for the efficiency reasons is the orange, then I would support the orange.
David?
And just to follow up, Terry, if you take the remodeling out or put it in to either option, the jail piece is the same cost.
Yep.
So, I mean, there is
Yeah,
difference on paper,
No.
there's difference showing the remodel.
absolutely
But that
right.
could be put into
Right.
that other option.
You're right, but my point is one doesn't have a remodel and one does. So there is a difference between the two.
Mr. Chair, I haven't got a sunset letter yet from courts. Hopefully we never do. But, you have to add that kind of into the equation, a little bit of thinking. I do agree with you, Mr. Snyder. The object is we need to have a new up-to-date jail. I guess some of the cost savings that the task force looked at and gave recommendations was to do some consolidating of other buildings to offset using this building yet to its full capacity, and to try to save the county as much money as possible and be as efficient as possible. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to have, 8 acres here to just attach on to the old courthouse and go, but we don't. And I find it amazing, and it shouldn't affect me, but it does. But I find it amazing that the city of Grand Rapids is okay with having a court or a jail on their busiest corner in Itasca County. It blows my mind, but I guess some of the public will hear more from the public on that aspect, but I would be okay with moving the orange option forward, the green, and maybe the east side, similar to what Mr. Tinquist said.
But I think there was very compelling reasons to move in one direction or another on the two options we saw tonight and heard about tonight, and I do put a lot of weight on the recommendation from both Mr. Thompsons, and I really see it in presenting to the public going in a direction there. I think there's a lot of advantage to doing that, and then contrasting it to doing nothing, and what that's all about, as well as a green space. Those are my thoughts on it.
And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, and Terry, you might be absolutely, in the long run, and the public will tell us more, but you might be absolutely correct that the west side might be the best option. East side, we have a creek problem. Supposedly the city says no, then they say yes, and they say no, now they say yes again. I moved the creek. It's in a pipe. Move it. I mean, but no one's got any money to help. Don't get me wrong. Okay, but the east side still should be looked at, and then a green site to see if we're comparable. If we're living with it's one of the reasons why I brought up the court site. If I'm living with a 19,000 square foot court, well, maybe I should be drawing a 19,000 square foot court space into the new green idea instead of having twice the amount of square footage. I mean, so we can kind of compare apple to apple concepts, I guess. If you're really trying to, we know a new jail is 38 million. It's pretty standard. So.
And my thoughts regarding the courts is this is an opportunity to identify those issues and figure how much those upgrades cost. How that is phased in is yet to be determined, because again, the original request was to build a jail. But I think it goes without saying this is an opportunity to make some upgrades in that area as well.
Yeah, I think Mr. Chair, I think we all agree with that. So
Mr.
I
Chair.
just posed the question, where do we go?
Well, so
Where do we go?
I kind of like the idea of the orange option, but also addressing the court needs above the annex. I think that we could set aside for now maybe the remodel of the third floor of the courthouse, but you really should take advantage of that opportunity to either go up one other floor or two floors, one or the other, but have at least, even if we don't build them, at least shell it in so that we could and not miss that opportunity again.
Mr. Snare.
And so to Leo's point here, it includes a courtroom.
Right, but
Courtroom and the shop.
And shelled in. It's shelled in
all
with
right,
a
well, then,
courtroom,
yeah.
But
but
it's
the
not
second
finished.
courtroom is
The
just not finished. First
Right.
one is,
Right.
second one is not.
That's what you're going to say, Dave? Mr. Adams.
If I had the opportunity to modify the orange option, I think when you have the construction person here on site, it's like tarring. You're never gonna get your driveway tarred cheaper when you have the tar guy tarring the road in front of your house. It's gonna be the cheapest it's gonna be when that happens. With that in mind, your orange option, if you could add part of this blue option, AKA add that second courtroom over the annex, finish it, be done with it, and then take your third floor, remodel it, fix the roof. Because you're going to have to fix this roof anyways. I mean, do it now or do it later. It leaks bad. And remodel it to get your ADA done. I think it would be on timing. I would tell you, I think it's and maybe David knows better than I do, but I think on timing, it's a good time to get those things done and you're done.
Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question to our administrator, what were the priorities of the judicial?
Security was number one, adding additional courts or 2 courts. 1 court really wouldn't satisfy the needs. They have visiting judges now. They still have issues. If they could add an arraignment court and an additional court, that would be preferable. And then ADA and accessibility things up in their current facility are the top 3 items.
Okay, so when we reference remodel the 3rd floor, and that's what I'm getting to my point here, what does that entail?
Primarily ADA, probably looking at how the benches are compared to the floor, because right now you can't get a wheelchair in some of those places. Maybe Lucas can help me too if my memory isn't missing me. And again, a lot of it is that accessibility. And then right now, a couple of them are too small. I don't know how we would do that. You can't fit enough people in there. Either you have 6 people or you have 60 people, and there's just not enough room.
Jury room.
And then the jury rooms as well. They have 2 small jury rooms that have 1 bathroom each. And if you got 15-minute break and you got 25 people trying to use a bathroom, it doesn't work. So those type of things.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayes.
Do you need to have a motion here?
If we wish to take action tonight, yes.
Are we at that point where what you want to put out to the public?
David.
I'm not sure that requires a motion. I think it can just be consensus and go back up to when I say east option. There's a lot of options within that option of going east that hasn't been nailed down. But I'm just saying to throw it out there to say so that people know that we look that direction, because I think this west option is better than looking at anything to the east. But give the people the opportunity to weigh in. If they feel that that's too busy on this corner, well, then we can go this direction.
Yep.
You know, whether it's east, west, or north. It's $38 million for a new jail. It's how you tie it in. That is the rest of the cost.
So in doing that, we direct our consultants to flesh out that conceptual plan.
You already have a floor plan and square footage. It would simply be putting it on that footprint next door.
Yeah, here's
And I'd remind the county board that in making this decision, even in considering a green space, the courts would need to go with it. If you're gonna move the jail and build it for $40 million down by the airport in Cohasset, wherever it would be, just separate it from the courts wouldn't be logical. Because then that creates all kinds of new nightmares.
Commissioner Trent.
So also, Mr. Chair, if we decide to throw that east of the courthouse option in there, we should have the cost of that along with it. I'm not sure now what that cost was, but.
Yeah, that's kind of, that was what I was getting at with my question to David.
So I agree with what you're trying to get at, but I disagree. You know, the east doesn't tie in well. It doesn't tie in well with the court. It doesn't tie in well with what we're trying to accomplish here in the flow of the jail. And it certainly doesn't address the remodel of the annex because it's completely on the other side. So I would be opposed to wasting any more time on an east option. Absolutely.
Well, and I don't agree with an east option.
Yeah.
So
So
if you want to
we're really down to 2
give
then.
the public their options.
We're really down to 2 options. A green site or
west
the orange
option.
drawing
Or a west option. Yeah.
or a west option.
Leo.
If we go with the orange option, though, I still think that we need to address the courts a little bit more than just the 1 courtroom. I think we should have 2 courtrooms in there.
And I would think there'd certainly be that opportunity to have that discussion.
I just think that let's try to fix that part.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion. And it's a process of elimination, so my motion would be that we discontinue any further discussion on the east option, or an option on the east side of our courthouse.
I support that.
A motion and a second discussion. Mr. Ives.
Mr. Chair, as I'm looking at the estimated budgets from the jail site or jail task force, I'm gonna tell you that if, I'll just throw numbers at you, downtown east side only, jail only was 41 million. And if any of you guys wanna see where I'm coming from, task force book, financials, okay? If you did a new courthouse, new sheriff's department, shifted everybody over, that was 70 million, and I can say to Mr. Snyder that I don't have a problem eliminating the east side. I think with that, what you're dealing with the moving the generator and losing all of your parking, it's probably a wise decision to get rid of the east side.
And our veteran
Snyder.
service, which is very important service to our community.
But we could, yes, very true.
Mr. Rice?
We have a first and a second on your motion.
Motion on the floor, we're in discussion.
I'm ready to vote on it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make another motion that, and I apologize, Leo, but the blue option, I guess I'd be, I'm not interested in going any further with that one. I do like parts of it though, Leo, be very honest with you.
I won't fall on my sword on that. It's just an option.
Absolutely, they both are.
So excuse me, Commissioner Ives, you were making a motion or was this?
Take a motion to eliminate the blue option.
Okay. Do we have a motion on the floor? Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Mr. Trent?
Does this motion just as is, or does it address a second courtroom above the annex?
Well, I like
Mr.
that.
Ives.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm just asking the question, would it include that as part of it?
Yeah.
So it's kind of an enhancement of the orange option, I guess.
I think you can add that on, Leo, if you like the orange option and you like, the two courtrooms above the annex, which I like. I mean, if you're gonna do that, that'd be, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of remodeling the third floor and be done with it. You're ADA compliant, all of that, I like that too, but I don't, just the flow of the building, I think the orange building flows better. That's
Commissioner
just me.
Tenquist?
I'm looking at this, that there's options within the option, that we're gonna have to weigh out cost and make some further decisions. Because if we're gonna sit here tonight and figure out all the floor plan and make all our decisions, well, there's 6 weeks of meetings coming up that I can free up on my schedule, because everything's done. Then we're just presenting, we're not going out and getting information. There's a lot here to be considered. Like I said, once they start fitting it on paper and tweaking it, things are gonna change, prices are gonna change, and we're gonna have to keep revisiting this, and at some point, we're gonna have to say, no, we can't do this now, or we will do this now, and so I think there's a lot of options with this, and some options from the blue that can be carried into that'll work too, so.
Commissioner Snyder?
If we could reread the motion then, so I'm clear on my second.
Can we please reread the motion?
The motion was to discontinue the blue option.
Commissioner Trent?
Okay, so, I'm not hung up on every minutia of how we're gonna design it, but I'm okay with the orange option as a concept, I guess, and then if we wanna add a courtroom or whatever, like David said, we can look at those things.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I think that the opportunities will present. Any further discussion? We'll call the question. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. That motion carries.
So then, Mr. Chair, in relation to the last conversation, then, could we give direction then to our architect and just to put a price then on what the second courtroom in option orange would be then?
Does our architect or construction manager have questions on
Actually,
that?
the price for the second courtroom is just the difference in that courts remodel line item, because we were shelling in that space.
Okay.
So if you take the, I don't have the sheet in front of me, but
So what would the price be?
1.3 million.
if you take the 7,326,000 from the blue option and basically shift it over to the orange option, so you got a difference of $1.3 million.
Okay.
That finishes it off, because we were enclosing it, roofing it, sizing mechanical for it, so.
And we've checked with the judicial to make sure this is adequate space.
Mr. Chair, and now that we have a concept, we'll certainly go back and talk to
Okay.
you about it.
All right.
Mr. Hess?
I guess, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at you, Scott, and Lair, and we have two different animals right now on the table. Sizes are a little different. Things that are in place are a little different. You know, one idea is a green space, everything added into it. One is a jail, courtroom, added on to an old building. So, I mean, if somehow you can apple to apple it a little bit for our general public, that would be wonderful, and come up with some numbers that your offsite has gone down by $4 million, so, but so we're dealing with numbers.
Commissioner, are you looking for that answer tonight or a comparison spreadsheet with the features?
Yeah, it could features and spreadsheet would work, hey? You know, if you wanted to add a second courtroom like we just talked about, it adds this. You want to remodel and fix the roof right now, it adds that. You know, it helps, it'll help a little bit.
The board should put a timeline on getting this information, so it isn't here for Deer River, but not for Harris Township. It'd be nice to get some of these figures here so that we're starting to.
Don't you got that in a little you got that in the book already. They already got it on his computer. Think you can have it done by the 28th?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
There you go. Any other discussion or action on this item? David?
I just thank you guys all for the help. I mean, we threw a curveball at you there at the last minute and asked to put some tight timelines on it, and just appreciate the help there.
Thank you.
Here, here.
All right, moving on. We'll move on to citizen input and questions. If you have any input or questions, please come to the podium.
Hello, I'm Linnea Johnson, live in Bovee. And I just wanted to mention, this was like when you guys were first talking about coverage and that sort of thing, is that with the first meeting, we had a gal who was a young mom and a business owner. And she had mentioned that a lot of people still get their information, especially if you look at the room, there aren't too many people, maybe under age 40, attending. And one of the things is that individual commissioners, if they feel techy enough, or if there is an identifiable stakeholder in that area or that community, people can live stream it and that sort of thing, so that it is something that can be seen from people's homes if they can't make it or what have you. I just feel like that's and it's no cost. So it can be right onto either the Facebook page or I don't know if there's other ways of linking it through the county, but and like I said, that is actually no cost, but it does get to a lot more people. And then the online social media invites and that sort of thing, there are ways you can get around from people commenting and that sort of thing. So if you are going to invite people to those kinds of things, because there's a lot of people who still don't purchase the newspapers, and there's still some people who don't listen to the radio, they get internet radio. I think that's one of the things that that person had talked about initially. So I didn't want you to forget about those kinds of things. And maybe to ask the newspapers along with your, because there are some who do that online, and to maybe make it observable by those people who aren't paid customers for the cost that you are paying them to do that. I know that once in a while, if it's something like extremely important for the public, that they do allow for the visuals online.
Yeah, unlock it. Okay.
And then to have a link, yes, is great. I did try to visit the Itasca County page to see the link for the new jail facilities, but I had to type in under the search engine portion to get to it, which it wasn't super easy to navigate. But still, there was that 103-page report, that initial one, and I think there have been things that have drastically changed. I think it was just put on there either 1.9 or and updated on 1.14, or I'm not sure how that went. But it seems to be a little outdated from where we're at, now. So to hope to see that updated sooner than later. And then, but just that huge social media portion where it can be shared and information can be brought out, and it's a low cost option. So just trying to help that out. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we've had some discussion about the county's Facebook pages and accounts, our website, and it seems, and please Amanda and Brett jump in. It seems that the county website with the link would be the best one-stop shop for all of the jail-related information. We could put links on the Facebook pages to direct back to that, but it's one spot that we can update, and you can get there through various means. But that would be the place to go. So it's also not confusing. Is it on a Facebook account? Is it on Instagram? No, it's on the website, and it's on that link. So please jump in and comment on that.
And Mr. Chair, exactly right. We talked about the logistics of keeping multiple sites updated all at the same time without trying to have any errors or confusion. And we just came back to the fact that if we had one place, regardless if you're on your phone or you're on your computer or however else you can get there, then it totally eliminates the issues of, miscommunication. One place has something else, and let the link get out there as many places as we can, but hold all the information in one spot.
And I think along with that, the Facebook accounts could be updated to show that there was an update made, and then it would direct you back to the website. So I just want to talk about in that we're thinking about that and feel that's the route to go. Throw that out there for discussion.
Yeah. I'm fine with that.
Yep.
Yeah. That'd be good.
Thank you.
Less confusion. Yeah.
John Casper, Grand Rapids. I just wanted to thank the board for their transparency. We all know how it went in the past, and that's water under the bridge, but you guys are trying to make every effort, it looks like to me, to get as much information out to the public. And that was one of our biggest concerns, a group of us citizens that started bringing some of the things to the board's attention that we did. And with saying that, I personally wanted to thank myself and a group of citizens that met with the new chairman, Mr. DiNucci, and Mr. Skiles here this week earlier. Talked about many subjects, a little bit about the jail, and a lot of it was about the social media and the live streaming and things like that. And I very much appreciate that you're taking action on that. I appreciate ICTV. I know some people that are doing that right now. whether we continue down that road. One of our discussions was doing the work sessions, and I know that's additional costs. But like Ms. Johnson says, we can live stream without having those costs. And the reason I say that, we've done it several times. The group that I'm involved with right here, one night we did it, one of the meetings we did, there was 56 people were watching it, and we just put the message out an hour ahead of time was all. So I think a lot of people, pretty much everybody has internet. Whether they have it at home, most people have it on their phone now, you know. So I really think that's really, really important, especially for the younger generation, and I applaud you guys for looking at that. I just had one question. The minutes of these meetings, particularly, are they put on that link, or do you have to go through the county website and then, you know, navigate to that, or does it kick you back to the county website?
I can answer that. Yes, currently, you know, for simplicity and not recreating information where you could possibly then, you know, forget to update something, or, you know, one location for the information and it's updated there. The new jail facilities page does refer to the meetings that are being held, these meetings, and when they're held, and location and time, and then it says that the agendas and minutes of these meetings are available back
So you
at that regular page where they all are, the agendas and minutes.
I don't know how hard it is or how expensive it is or anything like that. I'm not crazy tech savvy. My grandchildren are, so I always use their resources. But if that's possible, I think everything about the jail stuff that's going on, if it could be to that link, I think it would help people. So maybe something to look into. But again, I just want to tell each and every one of you, I applaud what you're doing with the transparency, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Casper, John, January 28th, 7 PM. I'm personally inviting you.
I've
Harris
already got it on
Township Hall.
7 different sites.
Okay, all right. Personally inviting you. All right.
Thank you.
Hi, board members and chair. Molly Randall, Bovee. I know you're going to be looking at different ways to pay for this whole idea of the new jail, et cetera, whatever is going to be done. But I was wondering if you had looked into any kind of grants, for example, through Blandon Foundation. So once we are aware of how to pay for all of this, I mean, that's another route to go. Has anybody thought about that yet? Have you discussed it?
Ma'am, the task force did a little bit. I'm sorry to tell you that, I mean, I can look at Mr. Thompson. You state want to help us a little bit, or, oh, don't look at him. No. Ms. Randall, so the state is a no. Possibly with the feds, we do have Mr. Stauber looking at that at this point in time. Vic is kind of did a little of that. I guess I wouldn't hold my breath. We did mention it to a fellow neighbor over to the west a little bit to see if they could help. It doesn't look pretty, to be honest with you. I think we should try every avenue, though, as you brought up. Blandon Foundation, no, we haven't. It's a great idea, though.
And I agree with Mrs. Randall, and the trouble you run into is that if it's an expected function of government, they move us into an entire category where it disqualifies us for any private granting. IRRB might be the closest thing that might help us.
I think we should try any and every avenue.
Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good questions, Molly. We personally followed up with the Blandon Foundation, and it is a no. They just don't grant to projects like this. We will be meeting with the IRRB, and there might be some assistance through grants in the tear down of, and preparation, if they're of the businesses next door. And we're going to meet with Leech Lake Tribe to see if there's any chance that we could partner with programming dollars that might come to the project in terms of, if we can designate this particular room, a program room for substance abuse or mental illness, they might have some federal money or tribal money that they could come back to us. So we're in the process of having those conversations right now.
Commissioner Trent.
Also, Molly, to your point, as well as grants, we're looking at other ways of reducing costs. We're looking at the demolition of any materials going to our landfill, and they've already told us that they can take that, which will save us many thousands. As well, we're looking at legislation to exclude the materials of the jail from the sales tax, which will also save a considerable amount.
Mr. Ives.
And Molly, at least in the task force, we were really utilizing a building and quite possibly selling another. So, I mean, those are still discussions we have to do with the commissioners here, but quite possibly selling 3 buildings and moving Health and Human Services here and so on and so forth. That was with one idea, but there's a lot of moving parts there, to be honest. And
Okay.
but there's some cost savings there. I'm at sale of three buildings back onto the tax rolls. Yeah.
Good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other input or questions? Other comments or questions? Last call for comments and questions? All right, is there any more business to come before the board tonight? Hearing none, we're adjourned.
Thank you for all coming.
Thank you.